Come by my place Thursday. I want to go over your performance, privately. I stared at the text message for a full minute before setting my phone face down on my desk. My name is Marcus. I am 39 years old, and I have worked as a senior compliance officer at Lumirin Publishing in Boston for nearly a decade. I'm not the type of man who creates drama, but I know inappropriate when I see it. Lana Prescott had been our new director for 6 months. She arrived with credentials from 3 major firms and a reputation for turning departments around. The executive team loved her. She talked about innovation, efficiency, and hands-on leadership. What they did not know was how hands-on she really intended to be. It started small. During our first one-on-one meeting, she commented on my shirt. "That color brings out your eyes, Marcus." I thanked her and moved the conversation back to quarterly compliance reports. The next week, she mentioned my cologne. Then she asked if I worked out regularly because I seemed to be in good shape. I kept my responses professional, short, focused on work. But the comments kept coming. She would find reasons to stop by my office. She lingered after department meetings, asking questions that could have been handled over email. When we attended the regional compliance conference in Hartford, she suggested we share a cab back to the hotel. I declined and took the shuttle. Then came the text messages. They started after hours. Questions about Monday's audit that could have waited until morning. Observations about how hard I worked and how much she appreciated my dedication. The messages grew longer, more personal. She mentioned being new to Boston and not knowing many people outside of work. Last Tuesday, she sent a photo. Nothing explicit but inappropriate. Her in-workout clothes with the caption, "Getting ready for my evening run. Do you run?" I did not respond. Yesterday, she cornered me by the copy machine. "You know, Marcus, I think we work really well together. We should explore that dynamic more, outside of these office constraints." I told her I preferred to keep work and personal life separate. That night came the text about her apartment and my performance review. I walked to the window and looked down at the Boston Common. 9 years I had been at this company. 9 years of building relationships, establishing credibility, and maintaining a spotless record. I had survived 3 different directors, 2 major restructurings, and countless regulatory changes. I was not about to let this woman destroy what I had built. Something told me Thursday would not be the end of this. It would be the beginning. I built my career at Lumirin Publishing one careful step at a time. Started in the mailroom when I was 25, worked nights to finish my compliance certification, and spent weekends studying regulatory frameworks that most people found mind-numbing. But I had a talent for details. I could spot inconsistencies that others missed, and I understood how to protect the company from regulatory nightmares. My dad always said that if you do good work and keep your head down, people will notice. He was a mechanic for 40 years and never once had a customer complaint. I applied his philosophy to compliance work. No shortcuts, no corners cut, just solid, reliable performance that executives could count on. The previous director, Janet Morrison, had been my mentor. She retired 8 months ago, and I had hoped to be considered for her position. Instead, the executive team decided they wanted fresh blood from outside the company. That stung, but I accepted it. I figured I would prove myself to whoever they brought in. Lana seemed competent during her first few weeks. She asked good questions, reviewed our processes carefully, and made reasonable suggestions for improvement. I respected her background and was willing to support her leadership. But things shifted during our third one-on-one meeting. She asked about my personal life, whether I was married, whether I had family in Boston. When I mentioned that I was single and focused on my career, something in her expression changed. She became more interested, more attentive. I started noticing small things. She would schedule our meetings for late in the day when most other people had left. She would close her office door during discussions that did not require privacy. She began complimenting my work in front of other team members in ways that felt excessive. My colleague Derek mentioned it one afternoon. "Lana really seems to appreciate your contributions, Marcus. She talks about you a lot in leadership meetings." I brushed it off, but I was beginning to feel uncomfortable. The text messages confirmed my suspicions. This was not about work performance or professional development. This was personal, and it was crossing lines that should never be crossed. I had seen this kind of situation before in my previous job. A manager who confused authority with permission. The target was a woman in accounting who eventually filed a complaint and won a settlement, but she also left the company. Her career there was over, regardless of who was right or wrong. I did not want to be that person. I liked my job. I was good at it. I had relationships with auditors, regulators, and executives throughout the industry. Leaving would mean starting over somewhere else, building new credibility, and hoping that whispers about why I left would not follow me. But staying meant dealing with Lana. And after her apartment invitation, I knew this was not going to resolve itself quietly. I drove home Thursday evening replaying every conversation, every text message, every uncomfortable moment from the past 6 months. The apartment invitation sat in my phone like evidence of something I hoped I would never need to prove. I did not go to her apartment. I sent a simple response. Thank you, but I prefer to keep performance discussions in the office during regular business hours. She replied within minutes. I think you misunderstood my invitation, Marcus. This was about your career development. I did not respond. Friday morning felt different. Lana was cordial but distant during our team meeting. She made no eye contact with me and directed most of her questions to other team members. When I provided updates on the quarterly audit, she simply nodded and moved on. Derek approached me after the meeting. Everything okay with you and Lana? She seemed cold. I told him everything was fine, but I knew it was not. Something had shifted, and not in my favor. I had rejected her advance, and now there would be consequences. The weekend gave me time to think. I reviewed my employment contract, my performance evaluations, and my record with the company. 9 years of consistent ratings, no disciplinary actions, 2 commendations from the regulatory board for my work on compliance audits. If Lana wanted to move against me, she would need a reason that had nothing to do with Thursday night. Monday morning, she called a department meeting for 10 a.m. Unusual timing. Our regular meetings were on Wednesday afternoons. I sat in the conference room with Derek, Patricia from Risk Management, and Tom from Legal Compliance. Lana entered with a folder and a serious expression. I have been reviewing our departmental structure, she began, and I believe we need to make some changes to align with the company's evolving needs. My stomach tightened. Effective immediately, we are restructuring the compliance unit to focus more heavily on digital publishing regulations and less on traditional print oversight. She opened her folder and pulled out several sheets of paper. Marcus, unfortunately, your position no longer fits our new direction. We will be eliminating your role as of Friday. The room went silent. Derek looked shocked. Patricia stared at the table. Tom shifted in his chair but said nothing. I felt something break inside me. Not anger, not panic. Something colder. Clearer. I understand, I said calmly. Will there be a transition period? 1 week, she replied. Human Resources will handle the details. I nodded, stood up, and shook her hand. Thank you for the opportunity to work with you, Lana. Her grip was firm, but I caught something in her eyes. Relief, maybe. Or satisfaction. I walked back to my office, closed the door, and sat down at my computer. I had work to do, but not the kind she expected. I spent Monday afternoon organizing my files and reviewing my options. Human Resources would want an exit interview. They would ask standard questions about my experience working under Lana's leadership. I could mention the inappropriate behavior, but without documentation it would be my word against hers. And she had just demonstrated exactly how much power she wielded. Tuesday morning, I requested a meeting with Human Resources Director Helen Chang. I had worked with Helen for 6 years. She was fair, thorough, and generally supportive of employees who followed proper procedures. I am surprised to hear about your termination, Helen said when I explained the situation. Your performance reviews have been consistently strong. Can you help me understand the reasoning behind this restructuring? I chose my words carefully. I believe there may have been some personal dynamics that influenced this decision. Lana has made several attempts to engage with me outside of normal professional boundaries. Helen leaned forward. Can you be more specific? I mentioned the personal comments, the after-hours text messages, and the apartment invitation. I kept my tone factual and avoided speculation about motives. Do you have documentation of these interactions? She asked. Some, I replied. Text messages primarily. I think we should schedule a follow-up meeting to review this more thoroughly. Can you come in Thursday afternoon? I agreed, feeling cautiously optimistic. Maybe the system would work. Maybe Lana had overstepped, and human resources would intervene. Wednesday morning shattered that hope. I arrived at my office to find my computer access had been revoked. My company email was deactivated. Derek met me at my desk with an apologetic expression. Lana called an emergency meeting yesterday after you left, he said quietly. She told us that you had made inappropriate comments during your performance review, and that the company needed to protect itself from potential liability. I felt the blood drain from my face. What kind of comments? She said you made advances toward her and that when she declined, you became hostile. She characterized your termination as a mutual agreement to avoid further complications. The room seemed to tilt. She had flipped the narrative completely. Now I was the aggressor. I was the problem that needed to be managed. Derek, you know me. You have worked with me for 4 years. Do you believe I would do something like that? He hesitated. I do not want to believe it, Marcus, but Lana seemed genuinely upset, and she had details about conversations that seemed specific. I realized what had happened. She had twisted our interactions, reframed my rejections as aggression, and positioned herself as the victim of harassment rather than the perpetrator. It was brilliant and devastating. I went to Helen's office immediately. I am sorry, Marcus, but given the allegations that have been raised, I think it would be best if we expedited your departure. Your final day will be today instead of Friday. What allegations? I cannot discuss the specifics, but there have been concerns raised about your professional conduct. I tried to explain, but Helen's demeanor had shifted. She was no longer an ally seeking to understand the situation. She was a human resources director protecting the company from a potential lawsuit. I would recommend that you gather your personal belongings and complete your exit paperwork today. Security will escort you out when you are finished. I walked back to my office in a daze. 9 years of credibility destroyed in 24 hours. Derek avoided eye contact. Patricia whispered something to Tom as I passed their desks. The narrative had already taken hold. I packed my personal items into a cardboard box, a coffee mug, a framed photo of my parents, some professional certifications. Everything else belonged to the company. The security guard was polite but firm. He walked me to the elevator and waited until the doors closed. I sat in my car for 20 minutes before starting the engine. Lana had outmaneuvered me completely, but she had made one critical mistake. She had underestimated what I was willing to do to protect my reputation. That evening, I spread every document related to my employment across my dining room table. Performance reviews, email printouts, project summaries, and my phone with 6 months of text messages from Lana. I needed to understand exactly what had happened and why. The pattern became clear as I reviewed the timeline. Lana's inappropriate behavior had escalated after my 3rd performance review in October. That review had been exceptional. I had successfully managed the regulatory audit that saved the company nearly $200,000 in potential fines. The executive team had praised my work publicly, but something else happened in October. I remembered Derek mentioning that Lana had asked detailed questions about my background during a leadership meeting. My education, my previous experience, my personal situation. At the time, it seemed like normal due diligence for a new director getting to know her team. Now I realized she had been evaluating me for something else entirely. I called my former colleague Jennifer Walsh, who had left Lumerin Publishing 18 months ago for a position at a competitor. Jennifer had worked closely with Janet Morrison and might have insights about the transition period. I wondered when you would call, Jennifer said. I heard through the network that you were terminated. That surprised me. What exactly did you hear? The official story is that you made inappropriate advances toward Lana and became hostile when she declined. But Marcus, I have known you for years. That does not sound like you at all. I explained what had actually happened. Jennifer listened without interrupting. This makes much more sense, she said when I finished. Lana has a history of this kind of behavior. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? She was quietly let go from her previous position at Meridian Financial. I heard about it from a friend who works there. Apparently, she developed an inappropriate relationship with a subordinate and then retaliated when he tried to end it. Why was I not told about this during her hiring process? Because it was handled as a mutual separation with a confidentiality agreement. No official record of misconduct, just a departure for new opportunities. This explained everything. Lana was a repeat offender who had learned how to manipulate situations to avoid consequences. She had refined her approach, developed better strategies for controlling the narrative. Jennifer, would your contact at Meridian Financial be willing to speak with me? I can ask, but I doubt it. Those confidentiality agreements are ironclad. But Marcus, there might be another approach. She explained that Meridian Financial had hired a new compliance officer shortly after Lana's departure. The timing suggested that someone had filed a complaint or threatened legal action. If you can prove a pattern of behavior, it strengthens your position significantly. One allegation is a he said, she said situation. Multiple allegations suggest a predator. I spent the next 3 hours researching Lana's employment history. LinkedIn showed positions at 4 different companies over the past 8 years. That was unusual for someone at her level. Directors typically stayed in roles for 3 to 5 years unless they were being promoted or recruited for significantly better opportunities. But Lana's moves seemed lateral. Similar titles, similar responsibilities, similar compensation ranges based on industry standards. It suggested she was running from problems rather than running toward opportunities. I found contact information for employees at her 2 most recent previous employers. I would need to be careful about how I approached them, but I had to know if there was a pattern. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. I heard about your situation. We should talk. Alex Peterson, former Lumiran employee. I did not recognize the name, but I was willing to listen to anyone who might have relevant information. Alex Peterson had left Lumiran Publishing 3 months before Lana arrived. He agreed to meet me at a coffee shop in Cambridge, away from anyone who might recognize us from the company. I left because I saw the writing on the wall, Alex explained. Janet Morrison was being forced out, and the executive team was bringing in someone to shake things up. I had been there 12 years, and I could feel the target forming on my back. Alex was in his 50s. A methodical man who had managed the archives and records department. He understood the politics of corporate restructuring better than most. But that is not why I contacted you, he continued. I know someone who worked with Lana at her previous company. She told me things that made me glad I left when I did. He explained that his contact was a woman named Beth Sullivan, who had worked in human resources at Northwick Ventures, Lana's employer before Lumiran Publishing. Beth had handled what she described as a very messy situation involving Lana and a male employee. Beth is willing to talk to you, but not over the phone. She wants to meet in person, and she wants assurance that this conversation will never be traced back to her. I agreed to the conditions. Beth and I met 2 days later at a restaurant in Providence, Rhode Island. She was nervous but determined to share what she knew. Lana targeted a man named Kevin Torres, Beth explained. Same pattern you described. Personal comments, after hours contact, inappropriate invitations. When Kevin reported it to me, I documented everything and began an investigation. What happened? Lana got wind of the complaint and turned the tables. She filed a counter-complaint alleging that Kevin had been harassing her. She had saved text messages where Kevin had responded to her advances, and she reframed them as evidence of his inappropriate behavior. My hands tightened around my coffee cup. So Kevin was fired? Worse. The company decided that both employees were problematic and terminated them both. Kevin lost his job and his reputation. Lana negotiated a departure package and a positive reference in exchange for not pursuing legal action against the company. Where is Kevin now? He moved to Oregon and started over in a different industry. The whole experience destroyed his confidence in corporate environments. Beth reached into her briefcase and pulled out a manila folder. I made copies of my notes from the investigation before I left Northwick Ventures. I cannot give you the official files, but my personal documentation might help you establish a pattern. I reviewed the documents. The parallels to my situation were striking. Same escalation tactics, same retaliation strategy, same manipulation of the narrative. Beth, would you be willing to provide a written statement about what you witnessed? Not officially, but if you end up in legal proceedings, I might be willing to speak with your attorney under specific conditions. I drove back to Boston with a sense of purpose I had not felt since Monday's termination. I had evidence of a pattern. I had documentation of Lana's behavior, and I had proof that she had used these tactics before. But I needed more than just evidence. I needed a strategy. That evening, I contacted 3 employment attorneys and scheduled consultations for the following week. I also began documenting everything I could remember about my interactions with Lana, cross-referencing my notes with the text messages on my phone. I was no longer playing defense. I was building a case, and I was going to make sure that Lana's pattern of behavior was exposed before she could destroy another person's career. My attorney, David Kim, reviewed the evidence for 2 hours before speaking. Text messages, witness statements, documented patterns from previous employers, and a timeline that clearly established Lana's escalating behavior, followed by immediate retaliation. "This is a strong case," he said finally. "Sexual harassment, wrongful termination, and defamation. The pattern evidence from previous employers is particularly compelling. What do you recommend?" We file a formal complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission and simultaneously notify Lumerin Publishing's legal department. Companies hate surprises. They hate publicity more. David crafted a comprehensive demand letter that outlined Lana's behavior, documented the wrongful termination, and referenced similar incidents at her previous employers. The letter requested my immediate reinstatement, full back pay, compensation for damages to my reputation, and Lana's termination for cause. "We are giving them 7 days to respond," David explained. "If they refuse, we file the EEOC complaint and pursue litigation." 3 days later, David received a call from Lumerin Publishing's corporate attorney. They wanted to schedule a meeting to discuss the situation. "That was faster than I expected," David told me. "They are taking this seriously." The meeting took place at Lumerin Publishing's executive conference room. David and I sat across from their corporate attorney, Helen Chang from Human Resources, and Chief Executive Officer Patricia Hendricks. "We have reviewed Mr. Ellison's allegations," the corporate attorney began. "We take these matters very seriously and have conducted our own internal investigation." Patricia Hendricks spoke next. "During our investigation, we discovered additional irregularities in Ms. Prescott's personnel decisions and management practices. As of this morning, Lana Prescott is no longer employed by Lumerin Publishing." Helen Chang looked uncomfortable but professional. "We would like to offer Marcus his position back with full reinstatement of benefits and back pay for the time he was terminated." David leaned forward. "That addresses the immediate employment issue, but it does not address the damages to Mr. Ellison's reputation or the emotional distress caused by this situation." The negotiation continued for 2 hours. When we left the building, I had more than my job back. I returned to Lumerin Publishing the following Monday morning with a settlement agreement that included full reinstatement, 6 months of back pay, a formal apology from the company, and a substantial monetary settlement for the damages I had suffered. Derek was waiting at my desk with a genuine smile. "Welcome back, Marcus. I never believed those allegations for a second." "Thank you. That means more than you know." Patricia from Risk Management stopped by later that morning. "I owe you an apology. I should have spoken up during that meeting when Lana announced your termination. Something felt wrong about the whole situation." The company handled Lana's departure quietly. The official announcement stated that she had decided to pursue other opportunities. No mention of misconduct or termination for cause. But word travels quickly in professional circles, especially when attorneys are involved. I received a call from Kevin Torres 2 weeks later. Beth Sullivan had given him my contact information after learning about my successful case. "I wanted to thank you," Kevin said. "I heard about what happened with Lana at Lumerin Publishing. I always wondered if someone would eventually hold her accountable. How are you doing now?" "Better. I started my own consulting business. It took a few years to rebuild my confidence, but I am in a much better place now." 6 months later, I was promoted to Director of Compliance, filling the position that Lana had vacated. The irony was not lost on me. I kept the settlement details confidential, as required by the agreement. But I maintained contact with Beth Sullivan and Kevin Torres. We had formed an informal network of people who understood the importance of holding predators accountable. I still work at Lumerin Publishing. I still focus on details and maintaining high standards. But now I also understand the importance of documenting everything and never hesitating to seek help when someone crosses professional boundaries. Some battles are worth fighting, especially when silence enables predators to continue their patterns.